Hi, welcome to Head Start, the podcast for race directors and the business of putting on races. Have you ever wondered how the choices you make about your race start procedure can affect every aspect of the rest of your race? Even simple things like choosing a wave start over a rolling start, or changing the order and size of each wave or the width of your start line, they can all have a significant impact on your race's safety, congestion around the course, and even your staffing requirements for aid stations and your race finish area. Today, I have the pleasure of having as my guest Marcel Altenberg, probably the world's foremost expert in crowd dynamics for mass participation events. Marcel is a senior lecturer at Manchester Metropolitan University and has helped countless races optimize their participant flows from start to finish. Marcel has so much experience in this area, and we'll be going over some simple rules he's come up with from his research that you can use to optimize your race start procedure, whatever the size or type of your race. Before we go into all that though, a quick shout out to our podcast sponsor, Give Sign Up Run Sign Up, the leading all-in-one technology solution for endurance and fundraising events. More than 22,000 in-person, virtual, and hybrid events use Give Sign Up Run Sign Up's free and integrated solution to save time, grow their events, and raise more. And a bit later in the episode, we'll be quickly touching on a couple of really great free tools Give Sign Up Run Sign Up have to offer to help you smoothen the process of checking in participants on race day so you avoid the crowds, the queues, and the headaches. Okay, let's get into this amazing episode. Marcel, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Panos, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you on today. I understand you are quite a busy guy these days in the middle of a global pandemic, being a crowd scientist. So you work at Manchester Metropolitan University, which, as you were telling me the other day, is the Hollywood of crowd science. So tell us a little bit about what you do in your day job and what you do as a crowd scientist, and also the kinds of problems that you look at.
Thank you, Panos. First of all, I need to pick that up, the Hollywood of crowd science. I keep saying that because I would have never thought that I'd end up here in Manchester. I'm actually from Berlin, Germany, and I came to Manchester because that is the focal point of crowd science. Anyone who wants to focus on crowds in events or in mass gatherings need to at one point learn from our university here or get in contact or inevitably come across Manchester Metropolitan University. So it is the Hollywood of crowd science, the one point that everybody needs to come across. And that also what's brought me here to study here, basically. There's a Master of Science, the world unique and world only Master of Science in crowd dynamics and risk analysis. That brought me here, and I stayed here because the university didn't let me go. I supported the course, and now I took over the course and am teaching this master here from Manchester, but into the whole world. Like, we have students from all over the world.
And in terms of the work you guys do at the crowd science program, can you give us like a brief description of the kinds of problems you look at and what it's all about?
Yes, 100%, because we know very well from daily experience that not everything can be solved just with having students in front of us and teaching them the fundamentals of crowd science. Sometimes you need a solution within days. Everybody who works in events knows that you cannot have a problem and then go somewhere, study it for 3 years to then solve it. Sometimes you need it solved within one season, sometimes within a few days in order to find a crowd dynamic solution for your unique problem. And that's what we do. We teach, obviously, I mentioned that, but we also have a consultancy aspect where we directly work with race directors, with event organizers, with public transport, and so on. We support them in their challenges. We make it part of our research, but we also leave them directly usable advice. We help them implement changes to solve their problems. Sometimes within, as I said, sometimes within days. And that makes for me, that's one of the reasons why I stayed in Manchester, that makes for me one whole thing. We have a direct connection to the industry. We are part of life challenges on a daily basis. Those lessons become part of our research. So although we might have solved an issue, we still research it We still make it part of our interest here because we are a university. And then eventually they will find its entry into teaching so that we can learn collectively, because way too often it happens that I, as a single event organizer, have a problem. I solve it. I'm so happy I'm over this challenge, but I won't tell anyone afterwards, or I might head to the next problem, and it will never become, like a rule that others can apply, that others can learn from, just by the pure nature of our busy industry.
Right. So, what kinds of problems, for example, in the context of what our listeners would be most interested in, that is endurance events and mass participation sports, what kind of problems are you trying to solve by looking at crowd dynamics?
Yeah, I give you 3 examples, and the last one will be the segue to road races. I want to first start with something like that's literally happening this year, the Expo 2020 in Dubai, like the biggest World Fair Expo ever, record breaking, the biggest budget, things that we have never seen before in terms of their pavilions and their whole layout. So with all those words that I just mentioned, all those like superlatives, this is not something that you can test before. This is not something that you can take a lot of experience from other events. You need to make it up, build it in stone with a hefty budget, and then it needs to work. So something where experience alone wouldn't carry the whole weight. And that's something that we do. And then obviously we have the luxury of learning from what's happening there at this massive World Expo. Another one, which is relatable to that, would be things like airports. We all know that it's constantly changing, the demand on an airport. Even before COVID, obviously, there are constantly different standards. Every airport worldwide, if you talk to the staff there, they're stretched to the limit. And they're all planning the next version of their airport that is somewhere down the line, like maybe in 10 years, they're going to build a new one. But even though in those 10 years, that between building 2 new terminals, in between every year, every month, there are different demands on the existing structure, but you cannot change it. You basically need to grow within your shell like a crab. You need to grow within your shell, find a new way to use what you have, because it takes 10 or 20 years before you can basically grow the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
But you still need to grow within what you have by optimizing. And airports are a great example for that. And that brings us to road races. We call it hyperdynamic in road races because compared to a theater event or even airports or football stadia, in road races, nobody ever sits down. So everybody is moving in down the course or to the start or out of the finish. So everything is constantly moving and everybody's moving at their own pace. It couldn't be more like thousands of ants and all having their different goal in mind, their different time goal. So, and there we do basically the same. We help events to grow safely, to change safely. It doesn't always need to be a growing capacity. It can also be a change because the city around you changed, or you cannot have the course as last year, or something is different than last year, and you need to know what does it mean for the overall movement of 5,000 people, 10,000 people or more. So those are the things that we look at, where we support great individuals, great race directors. They identify the problem, they can point at it, and we then support and add to their experience, given with the resources that we have and the niche interest into crowd science on a daily basis.
So by problems, I'm sort of thinking here, you're trying to sort of anticipate and solve things like bottlenecks or a very crowded finish line, how people get off the start line. Are these the kinds of issues that you would look at in the context of a road race, for example?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head here. It could be like a bottleneck. That's the very obvious one, that you might incur a new bottleneck on your course. That may be due to a construction site. Like anyone who has a city race or races a city race, they know you need to check for construction site. You even need to check for construction site containers on the road that kind of narrow your road out of a sudden compared to last year. So a lot of those things. But it could also be a new course that you need to investigate because maybe you have an inaugural race or maybe parts of your course can't be used like last year. There are very few races and very few years that can basically go with the same plan as last year. But it could also be different things. It could not just be solving a safety issue. It could also be optimization. So when we talk about aid station and staffing, there might be a way to reduce or to optimize your staffing by adjusting something on your crowd flow from the get-go, from the start, which could then also in the end increase the experience for everybody. If I give you the example, if you have like a traveling peak, basically, the peak of the highest density on the course, and some runners, they might be within this peak for the whole race, and they have an entirely different experience than those that are running or traveling behind the peak or in front of the peak. So maybe there is a way to even this out, give everybody the optimum experience, and also make the work for everybody on the course, every staff member, every aid station, every security guy, every guy who hangs medals around necks, make their experience better by optimizing the course.
Well, yeah, and you were telling me actually a really interesting example, which may not sound particularly grand, but you were telling me how by simulating crowds, I think it was the Berlin Marathon, you guys helped trim down the amount of time that roads had to be closed for something like 10 minutes, which again may not sound huge, but in the context of a whole city, like being released to traffic 10 minutes earlier is a pretty big achievement.
It is. Yeah, there was an example that we discussed earlier, which it was in the year that Kipchoge broke the world record in Berlin. But that for me was basically the win from a crowd science perspective, the cherry on top, which was by optimizing the crowds there, we were able to reduce the overall flow by close to 10%. So if you would work at an aid station or work post-finish, you would think, hey, this is not as fast as last year. It might even be less people. But it was actually more people than the year before, but the flow was much more even. And that was felt by everyone there. Plus what you just mentioned, we were able to get rid of one wave at the end. So instead of making it 5 waves, we made it 4, which our research showed us in this particular case made more sense. It's counterintuitive. That's due to the nature of 45,000 people, all on their own agenda, all with their own plan in mind. But yeah, those 10 minutes that you can give the road back earlier to the city officials, that makes for a good surprise at the end. It makes them happy. It makes the relationship better. And that shows that you optimized what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you have more runners, it's less busy for everybody involved. So they're better using their workforce. Have a more relaxed day, plus you're saving time. That makes for optimization.
And I think, and we'll go into some really, really useful tips. You have developed some rules as to what people should be doing at start lines that everyone can learn from in order to make the whole process smoother and everything. And we'll go into that soon. So I was watching one of your talks like 2-3 years ago or something, and you were explaining, the benefits of crowd dynamics. And I remember back then you were talking about, by simulating crowds in a race, broadcasters know well where to place the cameras and everything. And of course, now, having been through COVID, I guess some of those priorities have changed a little bit. So how has COVID changed the focus of your work?
Yeah. COVID changed a lot in the work with road races, but also in the work with everything events. My focus is mainly events and then goes in the sports direction. And then obviously I'm a runner myself. I'm working with road races for more than 10 years. I cannot get away from that. And there's lots to learn, also lots to use from other events. And especially with the COVID, it was for our work mainly about social distancing. It started very early at the beginning of the pandemic when we all tried to figure out what does it mean for us, when there were certain restrictions of this is how many people you can put in one square of 100 meter by 100 meter, or like how much space do you need to give everybody in feet or in square meter and so on. So we needed to assess first how much do we give them actually in order to see how far are we away from any restrictions and how close are we in order to talk to city officials and prove that we are either on the right side already or we can get there. And due to our work with big road races for many years, we realized we actually have this information. We actually know how many people on our course are within 100 meter or 100 yards or within 1 minute. Anywhere on the course at all times. We do have this information to screen the whole course for people within any bracket of time or space. And that means with the width of the road, we can then actually also make out how much square meter, how much space do we give every individual. And that gave us the start of a dialogue. First of all, gave us information for our own planning, And then once we adjusted what we had to adjust, gave us the chance to talk to officials, to authorities, and tell them of our plans, get them on board. And while there was in the beginning a lot of fear, a lot of unknown about the pandemic and what does mean for us, it gave us very quickly the chance to talk to city officials, get them on board, and change a lot of those unknown to facts. That might still lead to the result that we cannot have the race, but we at least know how far we're off. And it also led quite early to the first green lights. Like New York started in the fall of 2020 already started their return to racing project, which went over the whole winter and in the end will bring us to a hopefully successful New York City Marathon at the end of this year. And with all those races, with all those research done with us and New York and Chicago and Berlin and marathons like those, that gave us a chance to use what we learned there with like big scale races and take this knowledge and give it to others, share it with our friends and partners in Canada, in Europe, in Australia, and use it for the entire industry. That's the very long answer to your question, what we've done during COVID.
Yeah, indeed. And we'll get into some of those lessons that have informed what you've put together in the 5 golden rules for race starts. I think there's plenty of useful stuff there. Mm-hmm. One thing to mention here is that all of this analysis you guys do, you make available to organizers through a sort of company that you've spun off from all the research that's called StartRight. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so first of all, we are a university and we want to teach and share and research, and that's basically what drives us forward. And we realized in the road racing industry, there are like so many races. Every one of them is unique. They have a unique course, they have a unique mission, they have very unique runners that they attract. So while sharing taught lessons or guidance or principles, we also need to find a way to cater individually to this one race with their unique audience and their unique course. And for that, we developed an algorithm that can use all of those unique information with like information that most race directors have, like timing data, certain course data, and so on. And this algorithm learns from everything we're doing and can give advice. You can look at the course and you can adjust anything. You can put in restrictions, you can put in changes, and it answers your questions basically. It simulates your race. And the demand for this was quite high. We are supporting around 100 races per year with this service. And that was too much for our university, I must admit, for the structures of our university. So that's why we said, hey, let's have this separate entity that's called StartRight, and that allows us to support races very flexibly. So like whenever they need it, sometimes they call us a year in advance to talk through changes. Sometimes they call us 2 weeks before the race and say, hey, there's one thing that we need to solve or one thing that we need to prove to authorities. Can you help us? And we try to be as more flexible than a university can be by offering this service.
Yeah, I actually saw some really impressive videos that Grandma's Marathon, I think, shared online of simulation videos from StartRight, where you can actually see sort of like little dots of people coming into the start line in waves, then setting off, then another wave comes on, and you can see all kinds of data, like exactly where the peak density of people is over the course, how they then hit the finish line. So it's like having the race playing out in front of you.
Yeah, definitely. Grandma's Marathon was in a very unique situation this year. That's the race that happened in Minnesota in June. And they were a race that a lot of people looked at because there were some races before that, but that was like the first race as such that was a taster for what the fall season might look like. Fall season, which for our industry, for the running industry, is very important. We all kind of know that this one, it needs to work better than last year. So that was the first race that they already called it post-COVID, which sounds so good, at the same time so fragile as well. But yeah, we threw all our support at Grandma's because we knew of the importance. It used the software that I just mentioned, StartRight. It used everything that we learned. I mentioned they have like 100 races per year, which is like around about 1 million runners results per year that we're using to teach our algorithm, that the algorithm learns from. As much as I love running data, 1 million is too much for me to fully grasped. So we need technology to do that. And all of this improves what we can then use for supporting something like grammars. And what we've done there, COVID brought so many things to an extreme. While we would normally adjust a start slightly or adjust a capacity of a race by increasing or changing something slightly, like slight adjustments from one year to the next. Now you had COVID and you had to change on a massive scale so much. And that's what we helped Grammar's marathon to see if I change something here, like at the start, what does it mean for the rest of our course? Maybe there's something big that I'm trying to change, which only has like a slight difference for the whole of the race. Or maybe there's something tiny that I can change that doesn't cost me a lot, but it makes a world of a difference down the line on the course. We sometimes compare starting a race with a water tap. I can do so many things at the start. I can open it entirely with a lot of water, a lot of runners coming out, and then close it again. I can do it in waves. I can just open it a bit and let them trickle out. And all of this will have a difference for the course or a difference for the finish, which is 26.2 miles away, which is, I'm doing nothing else every day, other than looking at crowd dynamics. But seeing what the change at the start makes for a difference 26.2 miles away, that is really hard to spin your head around. You need some calculating power and experience to do that. And that's what we helped Grammars with. Their race was successful and conditions improved since then, and conditions are evolving and changing. And yeah, they gave us good hope for the fall season.
I guess what you're saying there is that if the course is what the course is, and then, runners are people that depending on their capacity, they can run faster or slower. Really, it all comes down to how you manage the start line. That sort of affects everything from that point onwards.
It is. And also I always say it's the last time they listen to you. Like at the start, you're all kind of team members. It's early in the morning. They are at the end of their training, at the start of the race. They are listening to you because they want this to go right. They don't want to waste a second. They want to do the right thing. They want to go, but also not want to go. But once they're going, crossing the start line, that's it. They're not going to listen to you anymore. And they shouldn't. They should do their thing that they came for, run an uninterrupted race. They shouldn't need to stop anywhere because it's a tight spot or because you need them to do something. And they should run their entire race. So the last time that you can change something for every individual is before the start. And runners really listen. They really cooperate. And where they do it is at the start. And then they should do their own thing. And all of those runners, with their individual time goals and their individual corral that they start in, they all together make the flow. There's a lot of mixing, a lot of things happening within the flow. And to get this right, you only have that chance at the start, and then the rest is hopefully hands off, watching what's happening, and you don't need to adjust anything along the way.
Yeah, so let's look at the start line then. And let's look at what, as you were saying, more than 1 million data points with runners and hundreds of races have taught us about how different choices of how you start your race lead to different outcomes in terms of people traveling through the course and finishing. And you have put together a set of 5 golden rules in terms of what you can do for your race start to better manage the flow of people and, keep everyone safe and distanced. So rule number 1 you have on your list is make sure you order your field by pace. So I guess we're saying put your fastest runners at the start and then the slower runners at the back.
Yeah, we really wanted to share something out of what you just correctly mentioned, more than 1 million runners and data sets per year. So we're constantly learning from this, and that is research that was done over the last 5 years. And there's a report to this, like I think 200 pages by now, and the software and so on. But we wanted to share this with everybody, and that's why I'm so happy that to be able to share this with your audience on this podcast, but also in writing, to really give away some of the lessons that we learned from this research. A lot of things might sound familiar and might be intuitive. Others are maybe counterintuitive, But this gives a race director some signs, some proof to their hands, basically, to basically prove their intuition and ensures them, yeah, you're on the right track, and we can explain why, and to share this with like races of any capacity. And that's what this works for. And the first point with order, that is true. It doesn't matter if you have a 200 people race or a 50,000 people race. If you can order them from fastest to slowest, that would be the ideal, because that makes perfect sense. Probably when you think about it, it reduces the number of overtakes on the course. If I have the fastest in the very back of like maybe a 200 people 5K race, probably the fastest will end up the first, but he needed to go through all the 200 people. And this works to any degree. If you put him somewhere in the middle, he only needs to overtake 100 people, and so on. But the main point here is you will never succeed probably in ordering them perfectly, because people have maybe a bad day or a good day, or maybe you only have 3 waves. You order 3 waves by pace as best as you can, but then within the waves, you cannot really order them without breaking that down. But that is not the point here. The point is any order helps. And even if you have your 5K with 200 people somewhere in the forest, even if you break that down into 2 groups, just bring a bit of order. It will help, because it increases the degree of order. We're not talking about having an order or not an order. That's not the point. The degree of order by any bit helps. And if a race of 20,000 says, hey, we will up the number of corrals or pens that we have and order them a bit more, they will have an impact. And if those volunteers at the entrance of every corral, they make sure they double check and help people. Hey, you're here in the wrong corral. You're in the wrong pen. Yours is over there. They will make sure that everybody is in the best possible position throughout their entire race. Among folks that are of similar ability, he won't be overtaken that much, which is stress for you. And he doesn't need to overtake as much, which is also stress for him and for everybody who needs to run past. And to wrap this up, there were races where every individual was involved in 1,000 overtakes. Like, we can measure all of this. So prominent city races where people were involved in 1,000 overtakes, either by people coming past them or they having to find their way through the crowd. And when we are able to reduce this to around 200, maybe 300, you get a feeling of like how that helps every individual to have a more relaxed day, be more in tune with their own race. But also, every time people overtake each other, they're running abreast for a second or two. And when they're running abreast next to each other, I need more course width. So there's an absolute benefit, basically, of ordering them just a bit so that they don't try to go through a narrow section of a course just when they're overtaking, by reducing the number of overtakes.
Yeah. And of course, less people overtaking is also generally good for health considerations now with COVID and stuff. You know, like the less you get people to be close during the course, particularly when they're sweating and stuff, you know, it's good to avoid overtakings as much as possible.
100%. You say it absolutely right. And my main point is here, any degree helps. So any volunteer at the start, you can make a difference to the whole race. If you at the start send a couple of people in the right pens and like focus on that, you can change the whole course. You can change the whole finish long after your part of the event that you were responsible for is over. The result of that is still be felt. And if you are a race that thinks about, should I have corrals? Should I order them a bit? Yeah, any degree helps. You don't need to change the world, but just any bit. That's what our research shows. And I think I went into enough depth here to make that point.
I guess you would order people either through past data or most likely sort of like self-declaration stuff. So, you know, you collect information. I've seen it on registration forms where you ask people, you know, what's your pace or what's your expected finish time. What about people that you don't have data for?
Yeah, that's a very good point. So that's what I mentioned, like any degree is beneficial, and that could either be by proof of times, so like a 10K time or a half marathon time and so on, or by projected finishing time. Doesn't really matter as long as you ask everybody the same thing. Do you have an expected finishing time or do you have proof of one thing? They will find their way to order them. Any order that you don't do at the start needs to happen on the course. That's what overtaking is. If you let them run for 1,000 kilometers, in the end, they will arrive very exhausted, but they also arrive in the perfect order. So if you are able to do this at the start, even better. So those that you don't have data points for, maybe you can ask them what are their carrier times like of 5K and 10K if they don't have a half marathon time in this example. What you shouldn't do, put all the newbies, all the first time runners in the last wave. That would be not a way of ordering. That would be a way of logistically managing it. That would cause disorder, like more than necessary.
Yeah, it's interesting because actually I was about to say that's exactly how I've seen some races I've run in the past manage people without times.
Mhm.
Usually what they do is they put them all at the very last wave. You know, I guess you could have people of all kinds of abilities in there. And I guess probably for logistical reasons, as you say, they just throw everyone at the back of the pack, which may not be optimal, perhaps.
Yeah, I've been in those corrals at the back as well. That was a long time ago. Now there is Strava. Now there is, and I don't know. You cannot even walk without something on your body counting your steps. So if there's any way to assess that, doesn't need to be perfect, then that can be used.
While we're on the subject of managing crowds, one of the areas that always gets people concerned is packet pickup. Is it going to run smoothly enough? Am I going to get everyone checked in and on their way fast enough to avoid getting those long check-in queues people hate? Well, Give Sign Up, Run Sign Up have really made an art of race day check-in. And with their free race day check-in app, the process of checking in runners and getting them their swag has never been more efficient. You can quickly get people checked in with pre-assigned bibs, if that's what you like to do, or you can use the amazing dynamic bib assignment functionality. What's great about that is, instead of frantically looking for the right bib on race day, you can assign runners bibs at pickup, whatever bib might be on top of the pile. All the runner has to do is come up to the table with their QR code from their confirmation email on their phone, get it scanned by one of your volunteers, and they get a bib number assigned to them instantly, and their swag order delivered in seconds. And you know what the best bit is? With dynamic bib assignment, there's no more wasting bibs on no-show runners. You only give out the bibs you need to the people actually starting your race. No waste and no money down the drain. It's so neat how much you can do with technology these days that we should actually probably dedicate a full episode on just race day check-in. But that will have to wait. Now, let's get back to discussing more of Marshall Altenberg's golden rules for efficient race starts. So, rule number 2 for efficient starts is that your start line should be 30% narrower than the narrowest point of the course within the first 2 kilometers. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty specific. That's not something that people would have guessed. Mm-hmm. How did that come about? And like, what's sort of like the logic or the intuition behind that?
Yeah, that's basically the first challenge that we had when we did our big research on crowd flow. Our first main challenge that was thrown at us, where we tested ourselves against, was like, if we have a pinch point on the course, and that was an inaugural race that we had here in London, and there was a pinch point on the course, and the question was how to fit through the pinch point, which led us to what you mentioned earlier, how to start. That's then the main challenge. And on a big scale, we solved this with an algorithm, but there are some, if you don't need the algorithm, or if that may be a bit too specific for the size of your race, this is a good rule of thumb to go by. And what is behind that is, obviously, before the start line, people are at a higher density than they can run. Let's forget COVID for this example. People are standing quite closely to one another. They're listening to some good tunes. There's a countdown, but they're standing at a density that is not normal. That wouldn't work in a supermarket, and it definitely wouldn't work while running, where they need more space. In order to give them that much space, you need to give them space on the course, basically, and that's what you're doing here. So if you reduce the start line width, basically, to go back to the example of a water tap, reduce how wide you open that tap. That means they are trickling on the course slower. So when less than, let's say, 1,000 people entering the course in a minute, it may just be 700. And those 700 that are entering the course within a minute, they now have more space than if it would be 1,000 in the same minute, basically. And that space is vital for them to be able to run. Like if somebody is too close to me, I cannot fulfill my stride, which I might do more than 2.5 meters per second. So I need that space in front of me physically in order to be able to run and have a quality experience. But the crowd science lesson that is behind that you need to give people space before they can move. Sometimes in the event world, it's seen the other way around. People moving create space. That's not the case. It's the other way. It's like you need to give people space in order to move. And that's what we're doing here. By reducing the flow, like instead of opening the tab entirely, open it just to 70%. And that means they do have enough space to run at their pace and to fit through anything on the course. That is as precise as we can do it to fit it into a few rules. But that's what, when we calculate something like this for, let's say, Chicago Marathon or Berlin or New York, we screen the entire course. We have precise measurements of every width on the course, and we check the start against all those pinch points on the course. That was done with pen and paper maybe 8 years ago, and now we do it with 12 million calculations to be really sure that everybody fits through there. But in one sentence, yes, 30% less than the narrowest point on your course should be your start line. And one last thing, this doesn't mean that the start gantry needs to be 30% less. It can be a pinch point before. It can be like a funnel before you actually start gantry. So start gantry would be, let's say, where your sponsor is written on there and you have a standard format over the course of the road, over the whole width of the road, and it says your sponsor. You can leave that, that's not the point. But 10 meters behind that, or 5 or 20 meters behind that, you can have a funnel built of fences, and that should be those 30% less.
So basically, at some point during the start flow, just make sure there's like a funnel there, as you said, which is at maximum 70% of the narrowest point in the rest of the course.
Yes.
So rule number 3, you're saying keep the density of people within the start pen at a maximum of 3 people per square meter. So my first question on that is that compliant with like typical COVID distancing requirements these days?
Not with COVID. This goes with when we hopefully return to racing mainly as it was before, then you would need to put 3 people per square meter. As I said, they need space in order to be able to move. And that's what we achieve here. There is some guidance out there that says 4 people per square meter, which we, from a science perspective, can say it is wrong. It doesn't work. So although there might be this number circulating out there, no race ever does that because it doesn't fit. It wouldn't work. 3 people per square meter, and that's something where we want to give race directors a number at the hand that is scientifically proven and that they have a basis to plan on. So 3 people per square meter is good. Very quality races, they go to 2.1, 2.3 people per square meter, so they give them even more space, which we found in surveys that's very well received by the audience if they do have this extra space at the start. With 4 people per square meter, I invite everybody to try it at home, 4 people per square meter. Try to tie your shoes if you stand in a quarter of a square meter. It's impossible. So that is a safety aspect. So here in this case, and I mentioned to you before the podcast that we do a lot of work also with stadia or with like football clubs here like Manchester City or United or Bayern Munich. And this is something that comes from their neck of the woods, that comes from the work with them. Like how much space do I need to give people in order to feel safe? Very important. So even if something would go wrong, they won't react in a stressed way. But also be safe. And we're talking about emergency here. I'm talking about evacuation. I'm just talking about general safety, that if one person falls, that doesn't mean that everybody falls like a domino. And 3 people per square meter is safe middle ground between using my space efficiently, but also giving everybody a safe space, no matter how big my race is.
Do we know what that number would look like these days under COVID? Like what that density would look like to adhere, for instance, to what we have in some places in Europe, to like 2 meter rule of social distancing, or 6 feet or whatever they have in the US?
Yeah, that is a very cruel topic because that is what makes or breaks a race. I need to give them 10 times that much space than what we're talking about here for, let's say, 2 meter social distance. When there's a queue in front of my supermarket here in Manchester because of social distancing, that's one thing. The queue is now longer, maybe double the length than it was before without social distancing. But if I have a crowd, I now need to keep that distance not just to the guy in front of me and the guy behind me. I also need that distance now to everybody left and right of me. So the space is growing in both directions. So if I double the distance instead of 1 meter to 2 meter, let's say we had this change here. It's a live example. We had this change here in the UK, 1 meter distance and 2 meter distance.
Mm-hmm.
For a roadway start, that would be quadrupling the space they need, just because they need to go in both directions. And that is even without a safety buffer. And that makes it very quickly not a viable undertaking anymore if I need to give them 4 times as much space between 1 meter and 2 meter, or in this case, between normal and COVID restriction, 10 times that much space. Like, you wouldn't find that. I don't know your specific ways, but I doubt that you find an extra 10 times that much space.
So basically you're saying that the 2 meter rule, if you really, try to design, let's say, a grid of people that adhere to 2 meters between all of them, you'd probably be looking at, if you said 10 times more, something like 3 people per 10 square meters or something, which is quite a lot.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's what you would look at in order to fulfill those rules. And that would be found that basically broke a lot of people's event, because what we also found in our research, that social distance, if we're looking at like 1 meter, 2 meter, or 3 meter on the course for all our road races, we looked at 100 races just last year again, and they all fulfilled social distance requirements on the course, having 5 meter, 10 meter distance between runners. It is a start that needs to be nailed. Post finish and on the course, road races don't have that problem. They fulfill the requirements. It is the start aspect where you need so much more space. And the difference between 2 meters that we had here in the UK and 1 meter 50 that we had, let's say, in Germany or parts of Europe, that is massive. As I just said, like the quadruple of distance plus multiplying it with the high number of participants, that can make or break an event. So when we changed it here from 2 meter to 1 meter in the UK, that is a different world entirely. And even the difference between 6 feet, which is checks out at around 1 meter 80. So 1 meter 80 to 2 meter difference, that is making such a big difference on a large scale, more than I sometimes think. When those rules are introduced for good reason, they seem to be super even, more even than a scientist would do it. So 1 meter, 2 meter, something that's easy to digest. But just centimeters here per person changes if a race can go ahead or not.
So in terms of having to do race starts with some degree of social distancing that goes beyond the normal distancing you would allow in your rule 3 of where you said, like max 3 people per square meter, where you sort of deduce this number more on the basis of keeping people comfortable on the start line, but that was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Have you seen any special protocols being put together for race starts that would allow races to start with social distancing, even large races?
Yeah, we helped a lot of races put in a social distance start with different formats. Could be time trial start, where like 5 people set off every few seconds, or where individual corrals of like 100 or 200 people set off at one go, and then there's the next ones, or maybe even all of them walking up, like call it zombie walking to the start, to like keep that distance. And we helped them with that, and I'm so happy to say that we also have again races in the US and in the UK and also parts of Australia where we can go back to those 3 people per square meter. We had race here, a 10K race last weekend, which was a mix of a hybrid between social distance and non-social distance, which was part of the tests that are run here by the government. And they luckily go back to those rules before COVID, and people luckily react the same way to it. So when we say here 3 people per square meter was safe before COVID, we now have proof, or we now have evidence that this will still work post-COVID and will give people the environment that they feel safe in and that they react the way we knew them before.
So by safe, you're talking about the Reunion 10K or something, right? The test event. I think that's what it was called, that the government put together in the UK. Are you saying that even when nowadays you start people with the 3 people per square meter density, that this event still ended up being safe from a COVID transmission point of view, or from simply like people keeping safe and comfortable general point of view?
From a COVID transmission point of view, there will be a report on this. This is something for the medical side to release, but the indications are all quite positive. And the team of the London Marathon, who were behind those test events, they did a fabulous job of putting all of this together. But here, the density aspect, again, let's say that this is post-COVID. Hopefully, we can return to something like this. But how tightly I pack them makes a difference for, first of all, how safe they are and how safe they feel. And I just want to give you 2 examples on this. If I put people at like 4 people per square meter or 5, and I give one of them a push or one of them loses their balance, they will all fall. And if my whole start corral falls because I packed them too tightly, and I can invite everybody to look something like this up on YouTube, to look what this looks like at a concert where we can learn from, or a gathering to watch football publicly. This is not something that you want to have in your start corral. So 3 people per square meter is something that means nobody gets crushed, to be very dramatic, and nobody to fall because the guy next to me falls, because I have enough space to make the step to catch myself before I fall into the next person. And that's a reality that we have now and will also have after whatever the reality looks like post-COVID. There might be sometimes moments where I need to work with my crowd. I give an example, and that might be a delayed start due to something that I need to figure out on the course. I don't want to mention the word terror here. It could also be a water pipe breaking somewhere, which is always an example that to orientate on. So something that forces me to delay the start, just to get something off the road somewhere. And we all know that, let's say, if I go to a library here at my university, I know what a library feels like, how much space I would have at the library left and right of me in order to feel comfortable, take a book out and like read in it, or in the subway, like on the train, on my way to the university, to the library. There I accept an entirely different close contact to people that I'm packed with in one carriage of a subway. So there are 2 different scenarios in which I accept a different density. So if somebody would come that close to me in the library, that he just stood next to me in the subway, it would feel uncomfortable. It would affect my sense of safety. And the same is true in a start corral. So if I ask people, we need to lay the start by 5 minutes, and it may even be raining, and they might not know what's going on. If they have a space that they feel safe in, and that is what we found out is like 3 people per square meter, they are more cooperating with me than if somebody's breathing in their neck and I'm asking them to endure this 10 minutes longer, and I can't even share with them fully what's going on. And in order to keep them physically safe and keep them safe in order to cooperate and feel safe, that's the value. And I'm happy to share that we saw 3 people per square meter already, like not too long ago, just days ago, and I'm really hoping we will return to this reality.
Yeah, well, so does everyone, I think, listening in. Well, moving on, rule 4, you're saying, I think we shouldn't dwell too much on that because it's something we've touched on already, which is your rule 4 is stick to wave starts. Wave starts help,
yes,
definitely. So rule 5, which is also quite specific, and at least to me, it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, is you're saying waves should get smaller towards the back of the pack. So what's sort of like the science behind that? Why would you have slower waves at the back than at the front?
So in an ideal world, I wouldn't need waves because everybody's ordered perfectly by pace. And if everybody's ordered perfectly by pace, like in a, let's say, small time trial at the Tour de France maybe, nobody should ever overtake the next one because they're ordered by pace and they're getting on the course with some distance. So no single overtaking. But that's not the reality. And because I cannot order them by pace, I should stretch them out in individual waves and not just ordering them in pens and corrals. It makes sense to put some minutes in between. If I do have the time, like street closure time, I should put some minutes in between. And that means I understand and accept I cannot order them perfectly. And that's where waves add to this effect. So they're basically substituting the order. And inevitably, the first one of the second wave will at one point catch the last one of the wave before, and then they start mixing. So I delayed the point when they start to mix and order in a new order. I delayed this point a bit. That means overall it will be less overtakes on the entire course compared to letting them do this self-ordering process from the beginning. That's one point. That's why waves, unless you have the perfect order, which I would love to see the data if you achieve that, and we are working on trying to get the perfectly ordered race, but unless you can achieve that, waves really help. And that brings us to this rule number 5, that waves to the back should get smaller. Reason for that is, in the front, I do have fast runners, and they normally stretch out better because they are different people with different abilities. If I, like, let's say, have a half marathon, it could be that if you run sub 90 minutes, you're still in the first 5% of the overall race. So the big aspect of the race, 90 minutes to maybe a total of, most races go to 3 hours 15 of a half marathon. That's where the majority of the race is. So I don't need to focus that much on the guys in the front. First of all, they know their predicted finishing time very well, down to the second, like what their ambition is today. They racing streamlined, and they stretch themselves out because it's less people per individual minute that they're even able to run that. And that changes entirely to the guys in the back. Those men and women that are running there, they don't know their time this exactly. They sometimes round to the next full 30 minutes. And I need to counterbalance for that. I need to take them apart and put them in waves. They also cling together. They sometimes run in groups more than the individual with his individual unique goal would do that. And plus, yeah, they're much harder because I have more people around my 4-hour mark, around my 5 or 3.5 hour mark. And I need to spread them out more, which again, I need to do that at the start because on the course, they might stick together more. And I know the reality is completely the other way around. I know this is my sub 90 minutes, sub 100 minutes, to stay with my half marathon example, my sub 2 hours, and then the big rest where I have it's hard to put a handle on them. But those are exactly the men and women that I should put into smaller waves. And we mentioned that multiple times now. Order is scientifically the best way to do it, and reducing the tap at the start, and everything that I can't perfectly order, that would be my waves. And smaller waves to the back, bigger waves to the front. They will solve the problem on the course. They will order themselves on the course and have the space to do that. But my focus should be on those guys on the back, and they will appreciate if I improve their experience, their running experience, for sure. Because to face it, they are also our main audience. Kipchoge is great. I love the man, but our main audience are the thousands and tens of thousands in the back of the race, where sometimes the atmosphere is much better, and you help them if you allow them smaller waves.
Perfect. So let me just summarize for everyone the 5 rules for efficient race starts. And again, hopefully we'll get this out into a document for everyone with a little bit more detail. So rule number 1, order your field by pace. Rule number 2, make sure your start line or somewhere along your start line, there's a kind of funnel that is at least 30% narrower than the narrowest point on the course. Keep it to a maximum of 3 people per square meter at the start pen for just a safe and comfortable race start for everybody. And this doesn't assume social distancing, so you may want to adjust that. Rule number 4, do wave starts, obvious. And then rule number 5, try to keep the waves at the back of the race smaller than the waves at the front of the race. Perfect. So let me put to you a couple of questions we've had in our race directors group on Facebook.
Yeah.
Again, around starts and other kind of like crowd density, crowd dynamic questions that people have. So some people, and it's a few, seem to during this COVID period, they seem to have ended up doing what they call open starts. So basically a start procedure where basically you keep your start line open for like 3-4 hours or whatever. And then people show up and, whenever they show up, you sort of like roughly make sure that they're distance and then you let them go. So rather than tell people, you're on the 9 a.m. wave and you're on the 9:10 wave or whatever, people seem to find it a little, logistically, maybe it's easier, but generally just quite efficient to do these open starts. And other people are saying it's also quite efficient to be doing rolling starts, which I guess is what you were calling like the zombie walk before. Do we have any like data or insights into whether open starts or rolling starts work well for start lines?
Yeah, we have loads of data now on rolling starts and that they do work, and they also do work efficiently. With open starts, yes, we also saw that working. However, it is less efficient because it's more degrees of freedom that I give to the runner, basically. So whenever I give people degrees of freedom, I need to cater for both options, basically. So to keep my race efficient and from a cost perspective, and also depending on the restrictions that I have and what I need to prove to my individual authorities, I might need to put a bit more control on it. And that brings us back to the point of order. Order always helps. And if I give people a start time, even if it's a rough one, even if it's a very loose one of like show up within this half an hour window, and the next people I give them the next half an hour, even that helps. So any degree of order here prevents unforeseen surprises. And it also prevents that I need to plan for everybody to just freely do what they think is right, because then I can be surprised, maybe for some reason, for some unforeseen train that leads to a perfect time to my start. They're all coming at the same time after, I don't know, the morning news or the morning breakfast or whatnot. Yeah, both can work. The safer and more efficient one is the rolling start and giving at least rough time windows. And that's something that's a lesson that we learned before from airports and from football stadia, who were luckily able to open much before road racing events. And there it also really helped to give people, and we saw the difference and we saw the data behind it if people have an arrival window.
Another question we get is, nowadays, when local authorities demand of races to adhere to some kind of social distancing pattern, or like to put some measures in place, that has repercussions for the maximum number of participants that a race can have. If you have, for instance, that, and also how long you can be on the course, it sort of limits you overall. Is there a quick sort of like rule of thumb or quick calculation that people can put together to deduce how they can think of the maximum safe number of participants at these times where we have COVID and distancing and other effects?
There's a quick rule that can be used, and that is in all the races that we looked at over last year, and you're right, we were quite busy, on the course and post-finish, as long as they keep moving post-finish, they all fulfill any social distance requirement that we have seen. We have seen different ones, like how many square meter everybody needs or how much distance they need to keep. You mentioned 1 meter, 2 meters and more. Mm-hmm. So on the course and post-finish, that is not the first thing people need to worry about if they're organizing a road race. It's the start. And just by giving this clarity and this reassurance, that breaks down a massive problem to one that at least focuses on one point. And at the start, people aren't moving that much yet. So if you can figure out how many people you can fit safely in your start, whatever that means in your individual situation, or how many people you're allowed to, and maybe your government helps you with that. Like they give you, your health authorities, sometimes they give a number that they see fit there, then the course will fit. And that's the reassurance that we can give. And there's also a lot of research behind that we can share. If you can figure out your start, the rest will luckily fall into place, which then can also be proven. But the first point will be the start. And we saw very creative examples here where organizers said, well, one start area doesn't cut it. So we have 3 start area, and they rolled together into one course, which gave them 3 times the capacity. And we helped them figure out to prove what I just said. Like the course is still not a problem. You need to have increased start width in each start area, even down to more than one race changing the direction of their course, because they realized their finish is bigger than their start and they need the start space. So they basically ran the same course the other direction to solve that problem. And then course and finish, it's still a challenge, but it fell into place and it's much more forgiving in our particular industry, which is very different to festivals and so on. So it's a start area that's our problem.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So basically you're saying that if you want to work out the maximum number of participants that's safe for your race to accommodate, even with distancing rule and everything, your point, which is really important, is, you can reduce that whole problem about what's happening in the race and the finish line and everything, so long as people keep moving, to just thinking about how many people you can start safely at the start and how many people you can safely accommodate at the start. If you work out that problem, which you can, I guess, work out from just the geometry of the thing and how long your start line is and how much time you have to start people off, if you work out the start where everyone is also static, which is a little bit easier, then everything else takes care of itself downstream.
I couldn't say it better, because you basically break down a whole operation to at least one picture. You said it is a static one. It isn't like everybody moving at individual pace. It simplifies it a bit. Like, as I said, a 3-digit number of races all fell into place from there if you can solve that one aspect. And we can prove that then, what that means for the course, that you can present that to authorities or internally. Like, once that start is figured out, we can look at the next thing, but I am quite sure that will be okay.
Right. So we mentioned earlier at the top of the show the work you do for people through StartRight. We've also shared some rules that anyone can use. In terms of StartRight, how can people get in touch with you if they really want to take their analysis of the crowd dynamics in the race a step further? Is there a way to contact you?
Yeah. So you can Google StartRight, or you can Google my name, or startright.run brings you directly to the webpage that gives you more background information, and they can also reach out and get that support. Our idea is to really help every size of the race. And maybe you find enough in those 5 rules that I'm, like, again, super happy to share with you, and especially with your audience via your platform. Maybe that is what helps you to support you in the right direction. And if your race or your problem is too complex, that those 5 rules are not enough, then you can get in contact and we can solve that then. Because a big race can by now only be taken apart by big data, by the right algorithm. It exceeds what we can do with our brains. We can bring the logics, but then at one point the numbers need to be run. And what we offer is support to your next race based on a flat rate. That's, as a university, our mission, to help with transparent and low costs any race, to in the end help the entire industry by bringing those lessons forward.
Perfect. Well, that's been really helpful, I think, for everyone listening in terms of both how you can manage an efficient start line when things go back to normal, and also some special precautions that people can take during this very weird times we're going through. I'd like to thank you very, very much, Marcel, for the time you took to share all of this with us. There's the contact details there for people who want to get in touch through StartRight. You have also a very public profile at the Manchester Metropolitan University. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
And thank you very much also to everyone listening in. And we will see everyone on the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode on managing participant crowds with Manchester Metropolitan University crowd scientist Marcel Altenberg. You can find more resources on anything and everything to do with putting on races on our website, racedirectorshq.com. You can also share your questions about start line procedures, participant social distancing, or anything else in our Facebook group, Race Directors Hub. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit follow on your favorite player. And do check out our podcast back catalog for more great content like this. Until our next episode, take care and keep putting on amazing races.